Krigbaum, and I'm a nurse, and I live in Australia. But as you can tell from my accent, I am from America, but I'm living here and working here right now with my family. So I'd like you to meet my Australian audience, and for America to meet all of you guys meet all of them. So I'm going to flip the camera around. Hello, Australia. And I also have a child audience member. So I want to talk to you about a disease called Machado-Joseph's disease. So I'm going to begin with just telling you a story of something that happened with my daughter a few weeks ago. I was riding along in the car, driving through town, and my daughter's 13, and we saw a couple, and they were sitting at a picnic table, and the woman got up from the table and started to walk across the street to a coffee shop here locally. When she stood up, she almost fell over. And she began to even wobble and had trouble obviously walking across the street. Her husband didn't seem to be helping her at all with anything that was going on, and it seemed perfectly normal to him. But to any of us watching, we were thinking something's a bit different. So when my daughter pointed it out to me, she actually thought the woman was drunk. So I told her, no, actually the woman's not drunk. I realized I knew the woman, and the woman has Machado-Joseph's disease. So you may be asking yourself, what is Machado-Joseph's disease? And that's the point of this speech, is to be able to tell you what is Machado-Joseph's disease, what it presents like, and compare it to a disease that maybe you've already heard of before. It's relevant for you in America because we actually have Machado-Joseph's disease in America, and most people wouldn't actually know about that. A lot of Australians and my Australian audience members here would have already heard of the disease. So I hope to just be able to give everybody a little bit more information, and maybe you'll be able to be a more supportive community members if you see somebody out and about with this disease and be able to pick out the symptoms a little bit better than thinking the person's drunk. So to start, I want to tell you that it's hereditary, and that means that it's passed from parents down to their children as generations go on. Machado-Joseph's disease is also very prevalent among the Aboriginal Indigenous community here in Australia. It actually is affecting about 5% of the population, which is actually a very large percentage for a disease. In America, Machado-Joseph's disease is actually listed in the National Institute of Health as a rare disease, and to be classified as a rare disease, it actually has to affect less than 200,000 people. So we don't know exact numbers for America, but we do know it's there. So that's a little bit about what the definition is, a little bit of Machado-Joseph's disease and who you maybe would see it in. You can also think of it as a movement disorder. So the proper name for it is a neurodegenerative disease, but that's big. So a better way to look at it is to think of it as a movement disorder. So as we get into talking about what it presents like, think movement the whole time while we're doing it. So early on in the stages of the disease, somebody might present actually like they're drunk, which goes back to my initial story of what my daughter thought she was seeing in this woman. So it has a very wobbly, unsteady kind of gait going on with the person. They also struggle with double vision. So sometimes the person with Machado-Joseph's disease, in order to be able to focus on you, they'll actually cover one eye so that they can try to see just one of you. So again, those are symptoms we would see with somebody that we think is appearing drunk. So that's early on in the stages. So unsteady movements, double vision happening. As the disease progresses a little bit, things that you might start seeing now is slurred speech with the person. So not only are they not walking as if you and I would walk and with a steady gait, they can't see correctly, they also are having speech trouble now. Maybe they're walking with some kind of assistive device or walkers, or somebody's lending them a hand to be able to walk. As the disease continues on from there, the person eventually will be completely wheelchair bound. They will have such extreme speech difficulties that it will be very hard to understand them. And the movements and the muscle movements going on throughout their whole entire body is now not just an outward appearance, but it's affecting everything going on the inside of them too. So while the mouth and the tongue and things were affected initially, now we're talking about movement going out throughout the whole entire body internally. So choking hazards and things are now happening with the person, and they can't pass food and digest food properly all the way through their stomach. And a big cause of death a lot of times for people with Machado-Joseph's disease is actually because they couldn't move things through their digestive tract like they needed to, and they suffer from obstructions. So you can kind of see where it progresses, even from little toddlers to adult. It can show up at any point in there. So they move a little bit early on with that drunken kind of feature, all the way to being wheelchair bound. So now that we know what Machado-Joseph's disease is, that it's a movement disorder, and we know a little bit of what it presents like and how it can show up throughout the stages, I want to compare it to a disease that maybe you've already heard of, which is called Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is also a movement disorder. To relate it to a person that maybe you actually already have heard of would be Michael J. Fox. A lot of people have seen him on television. He's done a lot of work actually to help with Parkinson's research and for a cure for it. And something you notice in Michael J. Fox would of course be his erratic movements that he has going on. I haven't necessarily seen speech problems with him, but that does come oftentimes with people with Parkinson's disease. So again, Parkinson's disease, Machado-Joseph's disease, those two kind of things go hand in hand together. As far as both of them being movement disorders, and other similarities that the two have that we've talked about already would be speech similarities. But I'd like to tell you some big differences between the two of them. And again, with Machado-Joseph's disease, we talked about that full wobbling feature that it talks about, that somebody looks a bit drunk at that point. And with Parkinson's disease, a very noticeable thing that you often happen is a person actually shuffles their feet. So the feet movement actually goes back and forth instead of somebody picking up their feet and properly actually walking like they should. So a lot of times Parkinson's is more identifiable, and you wouldn't necessarily think that person is drunk. People already kind of know what that is. So I hope from comparing kind of those two things and some similar things with their movement and with their differences, that you'll be aware of that and be thinking possibly MJD later on with the person could be a possibility. So the big difference that I want to talk about between the two diseases is the fact that Parkinson's is not a cognitive disease in a sense that you don't have cognitive decline. And what I mean when I say that is your ability to think and process information stays with you all the way until the point of death with MJD. And a lot of times people don't realize that, because with Parkinson's or some other neurological diseases, a lot of times the person also has a cognitive decline as well as mobility decline. They seem to go hand in hand. So those are kind of the two things with diseases maybe you've already heard of, one you've not heard of yet. And to conclude, again, I guess I want to stress the point to you about Machado-Joseph's disease, about it being a movement disorder disease, about not making assumptions with people with something that maybe you've not heard of before, and to possibly think that there's something neurologically going on with them. And it could be something like MJD, and that they're not necessarily drunk from it. And to remember that people with disabilities, no matter what stage they're at in this cognitive process, that they want to be heard, and they want to be listened to, and they want the community to be aware of their needs and wishes, and to be treated with respect. So I hope that through this you learn something about a new disease that you could be aware of and realize that person wants to be treated the same as you and I. So I'd like to leave you with this final thought that there's an organization called the MJD Foundation. And this foundation is absolutely phenomenal. This foundation has done so much research and employed doctors and people that actually specialize in the area of MJD for doing research. Most of their focus has actually gone towards the Aboriginal Indigenous people here in Australia, but again, it's because we're seeing a very high rate there. So if you would like to know more about the disease, I encourage you to go get onto the MJD Foundation website and research some more about it. So thank you very much.